you replace those lackeys, or those murlocs with lackeys, and that's a pretty common sight, I would say, right now. It's just one player slinging out a bunch of stuff and hoping you can blow it up on the other side.
Yeah, I feel like I'm definitely more the person throwing down the lackeys, having a good time.
Having a good time. Yeah. That's what Hearthstone's all about, honestly. I like it. And here, having a good time means a very different thing for these two players. Viper versus Thijs, our first match that's coming up, is we're going to unpack the deck list here in a second and delve a little bit deeper into what we expected to, who we think has the edge here, and so on and so forth. The match to me really, though, is about the consistency of Thijs throughout his entirety of his career versus Viper and his fantastic performance this year. As we take a look at Thijs' deck, this has been one of the biggest evolutions in a deck that I think I've seen since the inception of it, where this was initially, tons of minions with Book of Specters, and we've instead evolved to this Mana Cyclone point. Yeah,
I have to say, I am in love with this deck. I'm still not convinced that it is the bring to this tournament because it's so new comparative to obviously the Warrior and the Rogue builds, but I think if you are at the absolute peak of your ability, as we're seeing with players like obviously Asmodai, APX Void, just constantly at the top of Legend Ladder with this deck, you can do remarkable things with it, and I think Thijs is that caliber of player.
I definitely agree with that. I think almost everyone in this event is the caliber of player who can take risks with these styles of decks and really, put themselves to the test, as well as their deck building ability to come to an event like this and have to perform. I mean, we're talking week to week, you're going to have to be making these types of choices and making these decisions and taking these kinds of risks. I feel like for Thijs, this really sets the tone. If he takes a match one win here with a deck that's, still fairly early in the inception, and it has a lot of detail with play, that's a big statement to everybody else.
And I think that like you said, the shift with the league to having to perform week after week is one of the biggest assets that we're working in the favor of Thijs, because he is one of the most consistent players we've ever had in Hearthstone across any meta. I still believe he never missed a single playoffs throughout the entire time of the HCT run. And so, as we can see there, he clearly just, no matter what the situation is, can adapt to any outcome.
Talk about Viper, though. I mean, this could be the start of one of those styles of careers where his performance this year was just insane. It was a fantastic travel for him as he went from tour stop to tour stop and continued to put up results there, and inevitably found himself as a runner-up at the World Championships. That's a feat that few players get to accomplish. But look at his tempo rogue here. This is pretty mean and lean with a walk the plank is really the one tech choice that's in there.
Yeah, this is just classic Viper all over. He has been playing rogue since, well, I mean, if you're aged 4 or less, since before you were born. And he's been doing it very well.
Yes, that's correct. I am 4 years old.
I'm aware. Very hirsute for a 4-year-old as well. But yeah, the Spirit of the Shark, the Walk the Plank, the kind of slightly more modern tech inclusions in this deck, which I know you're personally a big fan of the Spirit of the Shark.
Yeah, I liked Spirit of the Shark at the start, and I couldn't really quite find a lean build for it, and so I eventually gave up on it. But as I started to saw Life Drinker come into the deck, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's a deck that wants to use its life total very aggressively just to chip away for that. You dagger on turn 2, you'll pay 6 points of health to deal 2 damage to the board that's coming up there. It just really makes a lot of sense, and I think that the single walk the plank really ends up paying off in this matchup versus Thijs here as well with the Giants. But we got game 1. Sounds like it's ready, and we're going to get right into it. We have a best-of-3 series coming up between Viper and Thijs, as well as 4 more matches that follow afterwards. So without further ado, here we are. And right away, Viper's in the spot he doesn't want to be without the coin and Rogue.
Yes, both. I mean, I think it's much more concrete in the Mage. You always want the coin. If you're on the coin, you're very happy because you get that giant down earlier. With Rogue, I agree you usually want it, but I think you can adapt your game plan a little bit more easily without the coin on Rogue.
So talking about that game plan, what are you looking at here for Viper? What's like the major go-to package that you really want to have in this matchup?
Well, like I was saying, for the Rogue, against the Mage, you've got to be careful about going too wide on board because they have Rabble Bouncers and Sea Giants in their deck, in which case Lackey becomes slightly less powerful than it is in some of the other matchups, or Lackey's and the Evil Miscreant than, say, in the Mirror. So I think of a lot of the time, what you want to do is you want to find answers to their Giants in the form of Walk the Plank, which we've got there beautifully. And then you also just want to be getting rolling with the damage, getting the Waggle Pick to face, all those free Dread Corsairs down as well. There's very little counterplay that the Mage can find unless they hit that Harrison Jones.
Well, I'm looking at this hand from Thijs with the Arcane Intellect with the double Mountain Giant in it. You said coin, Mountain Giant. That's really the thing you want. Is the second Mountain Giant something that you want in this matchup?
Oh, it's fine, especially when your opponent's teched in a Walk the Plank. If they find an answer to that first one, it really helps to be able to get down that second one. But the reason that you want Mountain Giant above all else in this deck, especially when you're on the coin, is the Conjurer's Calling. If you can get Mountain Giant with the Conjurer's Calling, the only 2 minions in Hearthstone at the moment that cost 12 mana are Mountain Giant and the
Grave Horror.
The Grave Horror as well from Priest, a 7/8 with Taunt, which really helps against the aggressive strategies from Rogue.
Well, not an aggressive opener here from Viper, though. I'm looking at Raiding Party. I'm looking at Myra's Unstable Element. You know, I feel like when you have Raiding Party, the Myra's Unstable Element eventually becomes better, but I feel like with the lack of aggression that Viper has early here, this could be a bit of a struggle to actually find time to do this.
I agree. It's obviously not the dream, but I think the other half of his hand, which isn't the card draw stuff, helps him get to the point where he will be able to use those efficient card draw cards. Like Walk the Plank just gets him a little bit more time. He's not going to be blown out by an early Mountain Giant from Thijs, so he should be able to find the time to get those raiding parties down.
So I guess kind of what you're alluding to here is this isn't like the classical type of Miracle Rogue where when you have to use your Eviscerates and you have to, you know, use Deadly Poisons to clear off board, you're not missing the damage afterwards. You have enough gas in the tank still.
Absolutely. I mean, essentially, Tempo Rogue is a burn deck at the moment. You're just trying to launch a whole lot of damage at the face of your opponent and finish them off with Leroy, Shadow Step, Waggle Pick, bouncing back the Leroy as well. All that goodness. But to be able to get there, you've got to get in a little bit of damage at the start.
So uses Raiding Party here for Viper. I imagine the idea was to search for a South Sea deckhand to try to activate the Miscreant at that point. So foregoing the combo on that, you know, you don't grab a Waggle Pick from it, but the idea is that he really needs to activate Miscreant.
Yeah, or rather just that he needs to do something. And obviously, if he'd got himself a deckhand off of this raiding party, he could have then gone deckhand Miscreant on the following turn, which had to be part of his thought process. But with the double Dread Corsair, he can't even fit in anything in addition to whatever else he wants to spend his mana on this turn, which looks like it will probably end up being a Walk the Plank.
It'd be tough for me to imagine it's not Walk the Plank here. If you put in a card that says, kill an undamaged minion, and then the undamaged minion your opponent plays is an 8/8, that seems pretty straightforward to me. However,
pretty good.
You know, that's really part of the expertise of playing decks like this, though, is when to deviate from those situations. I don't think this is one of those situations where you're deviating, but the idea that that exists is something you need to keep in mind when you're piloting decks like this.
And I have to say, I know this might sound absurd. If Thijs didn't have the second Mountain Giant in hand, do you think he ever would have gone Coin Ping on his initial Giant to play around the Walk the Plank so that it's damaged?
Well, that is an interesting thought. I mean, we've seen Thijs ping his own stuff before.
That's true. He is very famous for that. But I guess when he got a hand that is just this absolutely juicy, you don't need to be messing around with silly plays like that. You can just throw down your biggest stuff every single turn and then just rejoice at the fact that Viper really has found nothing this game.
Yeah, the lack of early aggression here now you're seeing is, you know, massively a detriment to Viper at this point. It wasn't because he couldn't work on life total. It's because he doesn't have anything on board to fight. You know, if you had stuff in play right now, a backstab and a pair of Eviscerates, probably enough to clear out this board and start to strand Thijs again with these Conjurer's Callings that he's picked up. But here, I feel like Viper's just fallen behind, and he's going to need something crazy to happen if he's going to win.
And Spirit of the Shark is able to work those miracles.
Yeah, you know they have the Conjuring, though. That's the thing.
You know they have one, and they might even have another one as well, which we can see Thijs does. He could just absolutely explode onto the board.
Yeah, I think this is undoubtedly a Miscreant turn and search for something to hit a panic button with. So, like, thinking Discover a Spell Lackey, some of the shenanigans here.
Yeah, maybe if you can get yourself Banish or another Walk the Plank, something.
Yeah, this is an opportunity to clear off one of these. So this is going to result in Thijs being able to, you know, further duplicate the board. And with the second Conjurer's Calling, that's really the nightmare for Viper, I feel.
Yeah, I think Thijs here, given that he's in such a good spot now, we now need to start looking at how does he lose? What does he need to play around in this instance? Which, like you said, I'm sure Thijs will be of the same opinion that he needs to play around Ethereal Lackeys, some kind of nonsense off of that, which obviously comes in the form of Betrayal. Could be something that messes up his game plan.
Straight up damage. You know, the Betrayal thing is interesting because the Sorcerer's Apprentice could it have been positioned differently here? Could be between a Mountain Giant and a Grave Harbor right now?
Had to have played it after one of the Conjurer's Callings, I think. So
if you play on the right side, I think you're right.
Yeah. Nothing. It's an interesting thought, though.
Well, the first one provides nothing. The second one provides a preparation, which I don't think is enough to stay alive.
Yeah, I mean, you can play the Myras if you pick Prep, but, like, yeah, that really isn't going to be getting the job done here, I don't
Prep,
think.
Eviscerate, Backstab, that's 6 plus the Yeah, not enough.
I give up.
Yep. Thijs. Quick game number 1, but that's exactly what Conjurer's Calling will do. It is cube and activate on a stick.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. I guess it is.
All right, no further analysis needed from Doc Brown in this one. We got to go to a quick break to get game number 2 set up here. Viper versus Thijs. They'll be moving on where they can pick from their tertiary and their secondary decks now. So we'll see what kind of stuff that they can come up with in their side decks, which we'll talk about when we come back for it. So when we come back, we're going to get game number 2 for this first match.
So you're probably wondering why I gathered you here. Let me take a moment and break it down. We've been given black eyes by the good guys. Oh, but that's about to change. Those meddlesome mortals who've mucked up our missions will finally feel some of our pain. You see, I have a devious plan that requires a demonstrative fist, and each of you will have your dreams come true as a fiendish finger of peace. What? All right, let me try this again. Alone all our dreams went. Kaboom! Yes, but united we'll take all the candles. No fish bigger.
I'm seeing what you want to do.
Let me hit it.
We'll come together so we can dismantle.
Now here's the plot to capture your greed and intrigue. We'll take Dalaran for all that it's got. As we form an evil league. Dalaran will be ours. Once we land, you know what to do. No we don't. You didn't tell us the plan. I didn't think I had to. It's perfectly obvious. Bank! I am to be robbing the bank! I take henchmen for vault smashing and shiny stealing! Plan is obvious! It's a start, yes, but...
You won't get a single coin unless you take care of the city's guards. Let's rip open Violet Hall and unleash the prisoners on the city. That'll keep the guards busy.
Certainly, but that's not...
No! First, we must sow chaos in the streets.
I got rockets. Anyone need rockets? Try to see the big picture. Shiny, shiny, shiny.
We have to break their will before we can loot, you fools!
Please, everyone, please.
Let's strap some rockets to the city.
Oh, big candle.
And then we just take the whole shebang wherever we want.
Yes! Finally, you're exactly right.
Seriously?
That's dumb.
Weak candle.
Just wait till second gear kicks in.
It's just like I said. We're going to take Dalaran for all that it's got. It's a genius plan. It's simple. It should have been obvious. And absolutely nothing will go wrong.
So, genius. How do we land?
It's Hearthstone Grandmasters for the European region, and we are going to get into game number 2 of Thijs versus Viper. Thijs was able to take game number 1 in a very convincing fashion, largely due to the lack of ability to do anything in the early game from Viper.
Yeah, it was just pretty one-sided performance. However, going forward with this best of 3, that's kind of as good as it's going to get for Thijs because he is sticking with his primary deck. That was already the kind of anti-rogue build in his specialist lineup, whereas Viper gets to switch over to his secondary deck now, which has got a couple of anti-mage cards teched in there.
Yeah, I'll talk about Thijs' list real quick. 2 copies of Acidic Swamp Ooze, a Harrison Jones, and 2 Frost Novas in the main. That's really, I think, the anti-rogue package in terms of just trying to stall their damage. You look at Vipers, though, he gets to now remove 2 deadly poisons, remove an SI7 agent, and remove a Spirit of the Shark. In its place, he adds in a Sap, a second copy of Walk the Plank, and 2 Hench Clan Thugs to have some early pressure going. As you can see, that was pretty paramount to his ability to secure board in that game.
Yeah, I think this is just the perfect anti-mage package because you've got the removal, which is very important for their Mountain Giants. We saw how good that would have been if he'd had a second Walk the Plank, perhaps, in that first game. And also the fact that this mage deck is actually relatively light on answers. It doesn't have many cards that immediately kill your opponent's minions, like a Frostbolt or a Fireball in there. So a Hench Clan Thug can very easily grow to insurmountable sizes within the matchup.
Yeah, if you're looking at the actual direct answers to a Hench Clan Thug, it's either from a magic trick bringing something, multiple copies of Ray of Frost, a Mana Cyclone providing something, or hitting it with your minions. That's the only way Thijs actually has to handle a Hench Clan Thug that's active early.
Which is the idea, isn't it? That you play it before they even get down those minions, especially if you're on the coin. They can't get their Mountain Giant down very quickly at all. I think it's a really nice inclusion here from Viper, showing his classically very strong understanding of Rogue.
Who would have known that Tempo Rogue wants to make tempo plays?
What a time to be alive.
Different kind of opening hand here for Thijs as well. You know, you've been playing a ton of this deck, I know. What kind of hands are you looking to have versus Viper? Like, if this was your opening hand, is this a keep scenario?
It's really interesting because I know that I am not at the level where I could play this deck in Grandmasters. Obviously, these are the best players in the world. But I often find that while these kind of hands with Mana Cyclone and all these cheap spells can seem very powerful, they seem very flashy and exciting, a lot of the time I feel like they're not actually delivering the meat of the deck. The actual physical stats on board pretty much purely comes through the form of Mountain Giant, Conjurer's Call, Rabble Bouncer, and Sea Giant, your big minions and your powerful spells in the form of Conjurer's Calling. So I can understand why Thijs would be happy with a hand like this, because it's got draw and it's got a little bit of generation with the Cyclone as well, but it is not the dream hand. The dream hand is what he handles.
Viper in a scenario where he's just going to dagger up and punch. That's one of my favorite plays in the whole Rogue deck. It sends a very distinct message to your opponent.
Which is, I'm going to poke you.
Yeah, or I have a Waggle Pick in hand.
Oh, right.
A lot of times you'll see players save the dagger when they don't have Waggle Picks, or sometimes even when they do.
Yeah.
Just to be able to fight for board scenarios there. There's not really a lot of stuff in Thijs' deck that Viper's interested in daggering down. So here, just take your damage.
Yep, I can definitely agree with that, because it looks at the moment like we've got a pretty straightforward plan here of just SI7 Agent into the Waggle Pick, just keep on hitting your opponent.
Whoa!
And Thijs here, even though, as you said, this indicates that there's a Waggle Pick in his opponent's hand, he just wants to get stats on board.
You know, I think I like this from Thijs, and the reason why I personally like it is because Viper's not on coin. And so what that means is, you know, tempo SI7 Agent plays, or what have you, they just don't work.
Yep.
And so here, Viper was interested in using the preparation for the Evil Miscreant anyway, but he expends an Eviscerate to kill an Acidic Swamp Ooze, so that way he cannot make headway on Viper's board. So I think the Ooze here from Thijs is really smart because A, he's got Harrison Jones, but B, he's got 2 copies of Mirror Image to soak up weapon attacks as well. You know, that's effectively destroying a weapon a lot of times.
And I think another big reason of why Thijs played it is it absolutely sabotages the Hench Clan Thug opener. Because if your opponent daggers on 2 and then plays it, the Ooze perfectly trades with a 3/3 Miscreant, but obviously wouldn't trade with a 4/4 version. So I think overall, that's a really good spot from Thijs, that it doesn't have to get the absolute most amount of value every game. It's just got to do enough.
I just had a casting epiphany, which is I always mention the secondary reason why a player did something, because to me, the first one, I'm like, well, of course. And so I just overlook it. And then you went back and explained, I'm like, why didn't I mention that? That is absolutely the paramount reason to do it, but why did I mention the secondary reason first?
Well, you're just queuing me up by throwing me the ball of the basket so I can slam it into the...
Oh, it's an alley-oop.
If you like.
The pass looks good, but the dunk looks better.
Oh, the dunk always looks better.
Oh, okay. Viper's about to dunk Thijs here with the Waggle Pick. And here, the removal doesn't look quite as good for Thijs. I think it's likely to come down in this scenario still, but you're putting a 1-cost Miscreant back in your opponent's hand. This is not necessarily the ideal timing, but this is a forced play from Viper. Either way, he's getting a Miscreant back. Yeah,
it's not ideal for Thijs, but like I said earlier on, your opponent getting a bunch of lackeys is far from an auto-lose situation. You're not too sad about that, considering how powerful Evil Miscreant is just as a card. Because as I said, you've got the Sea Giants, the Rabble Bouncers in there that you can use to get that huge reduction and then be able to actually utilize that Conjurer's Call in hand.
I'm going to go off the deep end here. What if you Conjurer's Calling the Miscreant first?
I wonder.
You've gone off the deep end.
Impossible. But in my head, this is how... See, you talk about the lackeys as though they're quite innocuous. I have sort of the opposite opinion on that. I feel like the lackeys are terrifying because your opponent just gets to swarm aboard with 1/1s and you have to do something about it.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. You can do something about it. Obviously, in his hand at the moment, he doesn't have all the tools that he needs to do that. But even just Frost Nova, you know, I agree that they are good. You do not want to bounce an Evil Miscreant back to your opponent's hand. But given how dominant Miscreant has been over the ladder for the entirety of Rise of the Shadows, Mage has a pretty strong counterplay, I think.
I wonder.
Three viable options.
Yeah,
this is pretty
These
rare.
Are all very juicy here.
Betrayal, good against the Conjurer's Calling turns. Eviscerate, good because it's Eviscerate. You include it in your deck. And Walk the Plank handles big stuff pretty well. Viper going to opt for Betrayal in this spot. So I am a little bit curious about the Betrayal because of the Harrison Jones staring you in the face. So if you're going to play Miscreant this turn, it is immediately challenged. And then, you know, Kicker, you're still leaving a 5/4 up.
That's true, which trades very nicely against your Miscreant and also could then just be Conjured.
Oh boy. Speaking of Conjurers, this is looking like a nice conjuring turn that's coming up.
This guy's tough.
I think I agree with you. I think I would have preferred the Eviscerate there because I can understand why he doesn't want to go with the Walk the Plank. It's quite expensive. He already has a handful of stuff to do. You want cheaper cards. But it does look like it's queuing up Thijs here to just very, very happily go for a big old Conjurers.
You know, perhaps that's something that you're
Surprise!
It does not actually duplicate the minion in play. You just get 2 random 5-cost minions from that Conjurer's Calling. It happening to be a Harrison Jones that's something.
Hilarious. Comedy gold.
Yep, and then the double mirror image plus the Mana Cyclone, and I feel like Viper is in tough shape now.
Thankfully, to deal with these mirror images, though, he has that Betrayal to...
Look at the presence of mind to play around Betrayal as well.
That's true. Good point, yeah.
Positioning matters so much more in this format, I feel like, than it really has in recent memory.
Nothing.
Wasn't a believer in the crushing walls meta.
You know, that situation came up a lot. It just was never present.
Yeah. Well, against a wide board, Fan of Knives is obviously tempting.
You know, I was thinking like almost some desperate territory here. Viper actually has no copies of Fan of Knives anywhere in his lists. So that's the lone copy of Fan of Knives. If he's going to make use of that, it's going to be with pokes and, you know, a second Fan of Knives discovery. I was thinking something as crazy as Pilfer to hope to get something crazy.
Like a Blizzard or a Flamespread. Yeah. That's interesting.
Because now the Walk the Planks, they're still fairly effective. But Viper's just kind of getting pushed out of the game by 5-cost minions at this point.
I think I'm with Viper on this one. I think you just want to keep cycling through your deck, get through to those good cards. But like you said, at the moment, he's not being blown out like he was last game by some huge giant play. He's just losing on board. He's just tempoing out.
Nice pickup.
Very nice.
Viper dislikes the position here, and knowing Viper, he has a lot of expertise with Rogue, and he will hold himself to a very high standard. I actually remember talking with him about this at the World Championships, where he was very decisively winning a game, and he had missed a play where he was like, well, I could have made my questing adventure an 8-8. And it being an 8-8 was the difference between snowballing the game and not snowballing it. And it was at 7-7 instead. He actually put himself in a position where the right combination of cards from the opponent could put him in a position to lose. I'm curious what he spots here that would have been any different, because this looked pretty fantastic to me.
Yeah.
Like, what's missing? That's what I want to know. His head shake is very telling to me.
As in, he thinks he made a misplay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, look at it. Hunter Ace and Viper are 2 of the most self-critical players I know. And look at it. They both ended up in the World Championship finals.
Big bad Archmage off the Conjurer's Calling, and Viper is not happy about it.
I'm not sure if oh boy is a general exclamation or trying to get me to pay attention and calling me boy. I'm kind of here for either.
Oh! 5-12 taunt gets picked up from it.
You gotta laugh at that. You gotta laugh that one off.
I don't think Viper gets out of this situation. Like,
I agree.
now the thing about it is
This was filthy.
well, Thijs's backup hand is it's stuff.
It's good. It's really good.
Viper's just missing the ability to make more impact on board. His hand is stuffed of just walk the planks.
All right, so what does the Betrayal do? If you cast Betrayal on this damaged Stegatron, and it doesn't really do anything. Or it doesn't do enough, I should say. Can't really sap anything.
I think you can sap. To me, like sapping Big Bad Archmage,
Yeah. I agree.
or the Boom Reaver is you know something, but clearly the Big Bad Archmage generating extra value the entirety of this
That's
duration.
gotta go.
You've got to stop that and figure it out later.
Okay, I think the key to this is that Betrayal for Viper, because as we saw earlier on, it actually put the choice of picking Betrayal arguably got him into this position because he didn't eviscerate the Harrison, which meant there was an easy Conjuring's call for Thijs. However, even though that might have been what got him into this situation, it might just be what gets him out of it as well.
It's tough to think. All of this started because of that Harrison Jones.
So crucial. That one choice of Betrayal over the Eviscerate has shaped this game immeasurably. And, you know, to Viper's credit, Thijs had a very good hand, and he's not going to slip up anyway in this matchup. So he probably wouldn't have been in a great position anyway. However, I think slightly different lines could have been what he needed to wrestle this miserable situation back into a slightly more ameliorated one.
Unity.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't even think that you could do that.
Well, something to note here, though, is you mentioned the play last game of ping your own minion to keep it, you know, not vulnerable to walk the plank.
Okay.
In this situation, though, Thijs's game plan, because he has Pyroblast in hand, was just to set Viper to 10. And that plan has now been accomplished. If Thijs does not lose the next 3 turns, in his mind, he's basically just won the game.
Yes. I'm trying to think about it. I think that the ping before you play Ziliac, so it still keeps the Divine Shield, I think that might have actually been a slightly better play, because you know he's playing double Walk the Plank in the deck.
Yeah, the idea to me is that you shut off the Spell Lackey so that way your opponent cannot Shadow Step.
Yeah, okay.
Crazy.
Yeah. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too fancy here. And I believe one of the Walk the
I think
Planks
it's a lot of. I never really thought about it.
Lucky.
But
Yeah.
I think it has a lot of. I mean, Thijs is, I think, fairly aware that Viper's coming into the second Walk the Plank.
Yeah.
The problem with the second Walk the Plank is it's just not really getting the job done here. There's still 2 5/2s on board that are not getting touched. Make that 1 5/2, but now you're going to 5.
Yeah. He's very, very, very low on health indeed. But finally, Viper has managed to clear this board, which, to be honest, I did not anticipate he would be able to do this all game. And he's got the heal as well. You know, double Life Drinker does get him up to 11.
And Hero Power gets a
Okay.
down to 10.
Well, Mr. Living in Reality.
Thijs has this one on lockdown.
Didn't get the Giant, which is a little bit sad for him. But, I mean, he can do whatever else, right? Unexpected results. Oh, I guess maybe if you get Doomsayer, it's worth playing around that, because you're in such a good spot.
It resets the board for you.
That's
still,
true,
though.
actually. Yeah, it's not even that bad.
And, you know, Viper's at 5. So 2 2s are threatening right now. They're very threatening.
They really are. And now that he's got the Kobold Lackey, Kobold Geomancer, that's the extra 1 spell damage for when Viper goes up to 11, so the Pyroblast can kill him. It's all thought through. Yeah, I think Viper's kind of in the same headspace as us, where he is looking for anything that could even possibly save him here.
I look back to that Harrison turn. I think Viper's hand was just too weak to justify the long-term play that he had decided to go for.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to have to settle into these kind of plays where I start nitpicking, because this is the best players in the world. You have to critique their play at the absolute highest level. If they're not playing perfectly, we're going to try and pick them up on it, because their opponents will be. A lot of the time.
And I feel like I'm going to be wrong in a lot of those situations, because these are the
fully
best
agree.
players in the world.
Yep.
But I'm going to give it a shot. that Eviscerate changed the game.
Yes, I agree. I think it was.
I will nitpick. I think nitpicking is right here, actually.
Let's pick his nits.
You're right.
Thanks, buddy.
It's like a waggle pick. It's just the right pick.
It was so tempting, though. You can totally see his position of, you know, the betrayal can be so nutty in this matchup, but it was just a very unfortunate instance. There was the Conjurer's Call in his opponent's hand. And as we can see here, Thijs just kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's here. That's nowhere near enough heal to pull Viper out of this one, even if there wasn't a Pyroblast in hand.
What's the weirdest thing that can happen that works? Well, if there's anything, it's two spell lackeys that can do it.
A step. Let's try again.
You got to think through, like, what is it though? Like, what does the job? Like, look. I mean, if you're in Viper's position, if you assume Thijs has Pyroblast, is there anything that does it? I don't.
Well,
think
no. You just assume he has no burn in hand.
Counterspell.
How do you even get counterspell?
Pilfer.
Okay, Pilfer. Yeah.
But you also have to deal with the board. Well, too many things.
I think that the most likely outcome is he picks Step, Shadow Steps his lackey, plays it for 0 mana, and then plays Vanish. Is like, in his eyes, probably his out. Oh wait, he's got a prep active. Sorry. Oh, he's got a prep active right now, so he wouldn't want to play.
Yeah, this is effectively the same thing. He needs the Vanish right here.
Okay, yeah, this was the right way to do it then. Doesn't get it. He can just play Myra's here, I guess. Yeah.
Viper trying his absolute hardest, fighting tooth and nail, but just fell too far behind in tempo at the end of the day. Thijs is going to take a 2-0 in the first European Hearthstone Grandmasters match, and in very convincing fashion at that. A Pyroblast to end. A nod to the old days.
What a way to close things out. Beating the runner-up of this year's Hearthstone World Championship by Pyroblasting him in the face. And you've got to give it to Thijs. It's a pretty bold pick to go for this Mana Cyclone Mage so early on in the Grandmasters League rather than one of the slightly more safe picks like Bomb Warrior or the Tempo Rogue. But it's working out fantastically for him so far.
Yeah, I mean, this was, again, pretty convincing fashion. I like the way that it's built, where he's considered anti-rogue in the first game. I think that was the deck that most people had their sights set on, was how do I defeat this deck? And if you look at his side decks, you know, he's got a Hexlord, Malacrast, 2 Astromancers, Archmage Antonidas, and a Stargazer Luna in the tertiary deck to try to fight against Warrior. So I think he's actually got a pretty solid game plan there. With just so much extra value packed at the top end. And even in the mirror match, his secondary deck would have 2 big game hunters and a mind control tech in there. So lots of ways to fight, you know, when your opponent's trying to do big shenanigans of the Conjurer's Calling.
Yeah, and I think the way you're describing all those different strategies that you can adapt the Mage with is why it makes such a good, or why it's looking to make such a good specialist deck, while maybe it's been struggling a little bit more on ladder, because it really needs to tech to the right matchup, and it absolutely can do that. But if you're on ladder and you're playing the anti-warrior version against rogues, you're just going to die.
Yep, and we have an interview with Thijs, and it sounds like it's ready, so let's go ahead and see if we can hear us. Thijs, can you hear us?
Yes, perfectly.
Congratulations on your first win here this week. Pretty dominant performance in this one. Talk to me about the preparation for Grandmasters in this week 1 and just the field overall. Like, how much did you consider your opponent when building versus just what you thought other players would bring in general when building?
I looked a little bit in my opponents, what they were playing. I'm playing Bunny and Viper first, so I was definitely scouting a little bit on them as well. But I felt it was very important for week 1 to just also go for a very good strategy, as a lot of people are still like figuring out what the best is. And I prepared quite well. I prepared like 3 days every evening after the stream. The last 3 days when I brought my decks, I was practicing them on stream. So I think I did a pretty good preparation.
I think so too. It's a pretty dominant performance. You even got to throw back to the old days with the Pyroblast to end game number 2. I want to ask you about your tertiary deck, the one with Archmage Antonidas, double Astromancer, and Hexlord Malacrast. How did you end up on this plan, and what exactly is this for?
Yeah, so what I think is very good about Mage, and I think Mage will only get more popular during the weeks, I'm really convinced that Mage is just one of the best things to bring, as the sideboard is just so good that you can do with Mage. And what I was planning, of course, with my tertiary deck, with the Antonidas, Astromancer, and the Hexlord, it was mainly to beat like all the warriors. I was definitely expecting that some people might go Control Warrior against me, and if they will like really go for like a heavy Control Warrior strategy, then They are not going to outvalue that deck. I can promise you. I practiced it hard.
And kind of talking about that, not being able to outvalue you, talk about, I think, Warrior in general across the 3 regions being such a popular deck. Where do you see the metagame shaping up from here? Like, what direction do you think it's really going to take?
I'm very convinced there will be way less Warriors during the weeks. I think Control Warrior is one of the decks that is pretty counterable as well. Bomb Warrior is a little bit harder. It's just a very good deck and strong overall. But I definitely think there will be a little bit more creativity. Like, you can really counter well in this format, and I think we will see that more and more during the weeks.
All right. Well, Thijs, thank you very much for your time, and congratulations on your week number 1 here. Looking forward to seeing you in your next matches.
Thank you.
2-time European champion getting the job done.
It's quite exciting. He's famous. I talked to Thijs, kind of.
Maybe I should have thrown you a question. I don't know. We'll do it in the next one. But yeah, looking at the match, Viper on Tempo Rogue. You have to get tempo in order to do it. Tempo. Yeah. That's the name of it. I feel like missing that Harrison Jones kill was the reason we're not seeing Game 3.
Yeah, I think that was the one blunder that, in our opinion, we saw during his gameplay. I think taking a look at his deck building decisions, I still think the Walk the Plank and the Henchland Thugs is the way to go to beat the mages. But I think we pretty clearly saw it really lowers the amount of threats in your deck if you got the double Walk the Planks and the Saps in there as well. So it can put yourself in a position where you're just not really doing anything for most of the game.
Yep. Well, Mage is looking pretty strong, and I think it's going to be a force, and I don't think this deck's done evolving yet. It's got a lot of weird room to wiggle with here. Even Banana Buffoon included in this deck.
Love that Buffoon.
Just a weird card. You're a big Banana Buffoon, and we're going to have some more Banana Buffoons that are competing. We got 4 more matches that are here today as well, Saturday and Sunday matches. So we got to go to a quick break, but when we come back, we're getting our second match of the day set up. Don't go anywhere.